I'm going to read a little bit of a longer poem. This is the opening poem for the new book. I teach in an MFA program also, and we have writers and publishing professionals come in all the time, and you know they're experts in writing and publishing. And one comment over lunch before an evening event was that they were talking about how boys don't read. And well, I mean, there's a lot of problems with that assertion, because there are many. First of all, there are many kinds of literacy, and the insinuation that boys are more inclined to illiteracy, I think, is a part of the problem. In fact, part of what I want this poem to do is to talk about the ways that people who aren't considered readers often translate kinds of literacy into traditional kinds of literacy. That certainly was my case. I didn't come to love books until later in my life, but certainly the things that I was literate in helped me become a good reader. So this is called Boys' Bodies in Flight Are Also a Kind of Text. Boys' bodies in flight are also a kind of text, and the epigraph is Boys Don't Read, the Experts. These kids run their sloppy fly routes right to left in a crabgrass park. They are counting by the thousands. They read the defense and cheat the rush or jump the snap. One of them eats a nice blind side hit from a slightly older, bigger kid and buckles for half a second, then jumps to his feet. You might not notice the big kid brush the shorter one's shoulders before he shoves the littler guy good and hard and hustles toward the huddle. When I was their age, there were days no one for 9 blocks could come out to play. So I used to ride my bike to Grace Street and sit alone in the middle of the baseball field, standing up once in a while to pitch dirt bombs at the church's back wall. Its glass stained with the lean, long-robed saints of Bonhamtown and a few undecipherable aphorisms of the Roman faith. Among my first urges toward ruin, to crack open an enclosure, holy or not, and set free what might roost inside. I'd imagine slinging a rock through one of the saints' heads and a plague of grackles streaming from the breach, the birds rushing out a lot like gangs of brawling boys do, spilling across an avenue underneath a second-floor neon Szechuan sign. How many times I was swift to headbutt another kid in the chin or mush some brat in the face who I thought was breathing too hard and too close at the bar. And so with a quick swat, I could set a whole downtown plaza ablaze with crews of crackling boys pouncing upon each other. Under street lamps, I bet we'd look like jackdaws stamping out flames or rooks simply mauling smaller birds. Someone told me the key to peace is learning to make my mind still as a field, like maybe the one from my childhood with its crumbling backstop across from the abandoned cosmetics warehouse. I've often wondered if the jagged painted glass of Grace Street Church is finally nailed shut with some cheap chipboard. I keep thinking the roof has probably collapsed by now, but I'm really remembering a shrine near my mom's hometown that was bombed by Americans who thought the enemy was hiding inside. When townspeople came to see the damage, there was a real sky in the gaping space left in place of the original sky frescoed on the dome which had fallen in. More wondrous, the attack knocked loose a huge statue from its perch. The 10-foot saint, cut from local stone, landed on its feet and was poised at the center of the altar, and thus forever blessed the site with enough power to invoke a pilgrimage by the grown sons and daughters of the nation's latest dictator. They knelt before that hard white figure to request their several intercessions, sobbing, prostrate, and surrounded by men strapped with armalites. By then, the local engineers and artists had been called to fix the image of heaven, the shadows of small black birds now fleeing paradise along the sun rays' golden angles of descent. I was brought up on the other side of the planet in a Jersey neighborhood whose one field was quiet long enough to bear the silence of a 75-year-old church and a solitary 9-year-old boy testing his scrawny arm and the inherited pleasures of rage. I was 25 when my mother died. It would be several years before she came back for a quick visit. We met in that field by our old house. A bare maple lay on its side between us. She somehow figured out I was hungry, so she turned to a line of bushes near the crown of the fallen timber and whistled. 3 notes into my mother's call, out burst a half-dozen fluttering game quail, so quick to flight they impaled themselves on the bare branches of the fallen tree. My mom held out her arms as if to call my attention to the flapping, bloody fruit. There are no photos of my mother before 1958, the year she arrived in America. I think as a child, she must have been very much like the children in our ancestral village who once accompanied me to the family cemetery. Even there, these children dart from grave to grave, reciting their own names and the distant years carved by hand. They leap from one hard marker to another, laughing in brigades. They laugh like hundreds of flocks once locked up in some musty space made sacred by so many small bodies crashing into glass. Doesn't everyone know of boys who dream repeatedly of wings, and yet so few of us know what to tell them the morning they wake up and feel what it's like to be changed by pain? Every generation, there's another kid on the wrong side of the world who stops praying in a dusty field to lift a stone so he can begin to understand what it's like to wish for the same thing for the rest of his life, promising to spring every body of every ghost from every shackle and every old wood hold. It took me decades to salvage my sadness from books. Tell me again that boys don't read. It is their hothead fathers and stubborn uncles who are too terrified to listen, let alone inscribe the fleeting stories that would name the first secret agony of those little bones poking through their backs.